Members of the City Council, please attend the call meeting of the City Council to be held in the 6th floor conference room, 801 Crawford Street, 5 p.m. Tuesday, April 9, 2013, for the purpose of a public work session. In addition, you may consider a motion to go into closed meeting by order of the mayor. Mr. Cherry?
Here.
Mr. Edmonds? Mr. Meeks? Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons? Ms. Randall?
Here.
Mayor Wright?
Here.
Mr. Rao?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the first item on our work session agenda is the status report on Willett Hall. At the last council meeting, we brought to your attention the issues that we were facing there. Council asked, were there any life safety issues associated with the building that would cause us to stop having performances there now? We told you that we would study that and get back to you at this meeting. And so since the last meeting, we've had a lot of science research, geotech work, structural work, and environmental work. And we want to report those results tonight to council. Okay, and I'm going to ask Dennis to come forward. And if you'll get the lights, please, somebody.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. Mr. Rose, as Mr. Rose said, 2 weeks ago, we came to you with a list of items that we deemed as important for you to see and understand, so you can see the challenges that face Willett Hall. And as a result of that, you came back to us with some very good questions. And we were tasked with leaving that Tuesday night and doing some homework and coming back to you again and giving you an update on where we were. And I got to tell you, the last 2 weeks has been night and day working on Willett Hall to try to get this information back to you, because we wanted to make sure that the information we gave you was supported by science. And I want to introduce some of the team that's been working with me. We've become very close friends over the last 2 weeks. First of all, from GET Solutions, Principal Camille Catan, a partner, Chris Caton, and from Applied Laboratories, Paul Thomas, and Quinn Zimmerman is standing up back at the door. And Roland McPherson with McPherson & Associates has been doing some structural analysis. And this information that we're going to share with you tonight is a result of all of the work that we've been doing. Along with these consultants, we brought in the Fire Marshal's office, and Mike Stockton is here somewhere. Where's Mike Stockton? At the door. And the building official, Mr. Doug Smith. And we've also been using the resources of Mr. Yusuf Khalil from the Public Works Department. Again, part of what our goal tonight is to bring you up to speed on what we've learned over the last 2 weeks. We've spent a lot of time under there. I've been going through that building for 24 years, and I told someone today that the last 2 weeks I've learned every crack and every crevice in that building, because we've been over the whole entire building, under it, on top of it, both sides, and sometimes I thought I was underground. But we got some really good information to share with you. The things we want to talk about tonight, we want to give you a historical perspective. Mr. Rose shared with you some knowledge that he had from someone who was a principal at the school when it opened, and there was a little finger of a tidal creek that came up, and we weren't sure exactly how far that was, but we've got the data to show you where that creek is and how that may or may not affect what's going on with the building. We want to talk about the source of the water. We've identified that. We did a mold assessment the day after we left here. Actually, we had already contacted Applied Laboratories prior to that and asked them to do this assessment. We have that. I've shared that with Mr. Rowe, and I think Mr. Rowe has already shared that with most of council, that what the conditions were. We have the building official did a complete assessment of the building. He brought in one of his inspectors. They went from bottom to top. His report is part of tonight's presentation. We had the fire marshal go through the building top to bottom, and his remarks are part of our presentation. And then I think what's very important is the solutions to the water problem. We've come up with a multitude of different things that we might be able to do, and the pros and cons of all of those areas. And then we put together a repair estimate. Now I want to be clear about these repair estimates. We've had 2 weeks to work on this. There's a lot of unknowns in this building. There's a lot of places we can't get to. We could put together an estimate, but I want you to understand that until we get in and we do some destructive testing, there's areas that we really can't identify potential problems at until we get into it. So that's really a floating number with some of the solutions we're going to provide you tonight. This is a picture of the area in 1907. And this is where Willett Hall was placed in 1955, or the school. This is the finger creeks that come up around Glen Sheila. And you're familiar, we talked a little bit about that 2 weeks ago. It comes all the way up to Hartford Street now. And we believe, it's really hard to pinpoint exactly where, but we believe it came somewhere about that soccer field for John Tyler Soccer League. We're not exactly sure exactly where it is, but that's our best guess. And this is a picture in 1944, and this is the golf course, and I didn't even know there was a golf course there. Some folks did know that, but it just shows you again how the area of Glen Sheila began to develop, and these two tidal creeks began to show a little clearer here. This is a picture of 1955 when the school was actually constructed, and you can see clearly how far away from the school those tidal creeks are. So this leads us to believe that this is not a tidal problem. And this is just a picture of the way we are today. You can see the hospital, West Road, Woodrow Wilson, and again, these were the creeks that we were concerned with. The first thing that GET Solutions did was come in and they did some soil borings, and this map depicts where those borings that they did were. The one B1 was done at 50 feet, the others were shallower than that, but that was the large boring. But along with these borings, we have data from 8 other borings that were done when the school was built. And what I want you to remember is that the borings that we took here show the same things that the borings took when the school was, that the borings showed when the school was built. The data is not different. The water table's the same, everything's the same. The only thing we did learn from the borings that were took when the school was built, there's a layer of peat down below, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's playing into our problem. Now this is a Cheryl, I'm sorry, Cheryl Hawkins is here too. She's with me. She's going to hand out a picture of this that you can look at, maybe shows a little closer. This blue line shows the water level. The tests that were done, the boring showed that the water level is 4 feet below grade. This line shows that this is the bottom of the basement, and on the side of the building you can see the construction. Now why is this important is because
Where's the basement again?
this is the basement below the stage area right here.
And the water level is the blue
The
line.
water level is the blue line. Now, that water level is what it was on last Tuesday, is that correct? That's the water level on last Tuesday. As rains come and go, that water level will move. The highest recorded water level on average from Virginia Beach was right at the level we were in February. That level has gone down slightly, but at the average water level is just a tad bit higher than that blue line. But if we get an intense storm, then of course that ground level, water level goes up and would possibly go over the areas that we're showing here. Now within the basement is pretty much solid, and it's like a bathtub. That's the way it's explained to me. The water can stay underneath of it and everything's fine. But when the water begins to rise and gets above an area where it can go into the building, that's where the problems occur in Willett Hall proper. But on the outside of the building, you see this is built, the construction is a little bit different. It's on a foundation. And what they did when they built the building was they went in and they dug soil out, excavated soil, because the soil borings that they showed on their drawings showed peat, and I'm going to ask you, it was at what?
About 18 feet.
At about 18 feet. And because that peat does this, they took soil out of the ground in order the weight that they were going to put the building on, it would balance itself out. Do you follow what I'm saying? It was designed the way that it is. That's the gist of what I'm trying to tell you. And because it's designed the way it is, we have these areas that are below the water level. So water is going to stand. And we've tried to pump it out, as I told you 2 weeks ago, but the water just comes back because it's groundwater coming back up to its natural level.
Now, this is the area outside the hall per se. When the old high school was torn down, a portion of the one-story structures were left around Willett Hall, the old shop area. The thinking was that they could be used for rehearsal space or dressing rooms or something of that nature. And that's where we have the one-story structure and the different type of foundation that Dennis is talking about.
And this drawing depicts exactly that. That area is from this wall up around the back of the stage and over to here. All of this area is one story. And when we told you 2 weeks ago it was built on piles, and the building is built on piles, but those one-story areas are not built on piles. That's the area that we're talking about where all the water is. But there still is sections under the building that you can't get from one section to the other. So in order to get down, no sir. But these walls, this actually is not exactly perfect. But this wall right here goes all the way across, and you can only get to this point. Then you have to enter this side. And all of these sections are cut up. So you can't move from one section of the building to the other freely.
So you got crawl space just through the tunnel area, not throughout.
It's a honeycomb foundation. It's concrete footing, so to speak, that is under the one-story area, and it's rectangle, and so it's difficult to go from one honeycomb to another honeycomb.
In other words, the crawl space is not contiguous
No, sir.
with the,
No, sir.
the whole structure.
And they displaced the soil. When they displaced the soil, they took it out, and take the charge off the soil, it created like a pool. And so when you look under the one-story area, and you can see standing water, and what that standing water is groundwater.
And remember what we told you 2 weeks ago is that we can't deal with the problem with the termites until we get rid of that groundwater. And that's one of the things that you task us with doing. Now, we did a mold assessment 2 days into, we got the results back shortly after our meeting, and roughly 2 days after that. And what those mold test air samples said was that in the performance hall itself, the mold levels were fairly low. There were some traces of mold, but if you walk outside right now and did the same test, you would also get mold in your samples. It's just the world that we live in. But they were under acceptable, what's considered the professional standards as acceptable levels. The air samples in the basement of the underneath of the stage and on the two basements that enter from the front of the building were above what's considered to be acceptable, and Applied Laboratories suggested to us that if we were going to send anyone in those areas to work, that they need to wear personal protective equipment. Air samples in the old school area were also extremely high. That's the one-story section here. Wherever those samples were taken around the perimeter of the building, those mold samples were extremely high, and the same precautions were given to us that if staff goes in, they need to use PPE.
What do you call high? What's acceptable and what was it?
I'm going to turn that over to our expert, either Quinn or Paul, whoever wants to answer that
If you
question.
would come to the lectern, please, and speak to that.
A little bit of context, the government hasn't set an acceptable level of mold because it affects different people differently. The ideal situation is that what you find inside the building should be similar to what you find outside the building, but less, because it comes in when you open and close the doors, comes in on your clothes, ideally gets filtered out by the HVAC system. That being said, there are some private organizations that have said this is a low level of mold, this is a moderate level of mold. When you turn on the Weather Channel and you see mold spore counts low, that's the National Allergy Bureau. Everything that we found in the building was what they would consider to be a low level of mold, with only people who are extremely susceptible or extremely sensitive to mold suffering symptoms. Correspondingly, what we found inside the building, while on the day we found was higher than what we found outside, that's because we've had a very cold spring, as we're all aware of. What was inside the building is similar to what you would be exposed to, or less than you would be exposed to when you're outside for most of the year. So going to the park, walking your dog, going to soccer practice, being outside, you'd be exposed to much more mold for most of the year than what we found inside the building.
Thank you.
I'd like to just add to that in that we've had multiple instances where we found mold, and Quinn has worked with us on that. And whenever we found mold, we take that seriously because different people, as he's already stated, mold affects different people different ways. I can tell you that when I walked through the building with Margaret Thorne, I got to get out of here because she's extremely sensitive to mold. I, on the other hand, doesn't bother me at all. So whenever we get these mold counts, we talk with Quinn and with Paul, and we decide where that level is where we want to bring our people out or not expose them to that. So we're very particular with that. And this is just another example, another sample where they actually put tape on the door, pulled the tape off, and they measured the mold spores and they counted on that tape, and they were very high. And I think it's important to know where these came from. They're on the school side. They're on the doors on this side of the hall. So when they pulled their tape samples up, they were on the opposite side. And it's also interesting to note that there's no HVAC on that side of the building. So it's just heats and cools with whatever the outdoor temperature is, and that's where all of the moisture is under the building. The recommendations, and I think all of you have already received these, that there's no immediate safety concern inside of the auditorium. Areas where high mold counts were observed should be sealed away from the auditorium, and what they mean by that is the doors that go into the basement area, all three basement areas and into the hall should be sealed. They don't want us to access those areas through the hall, so if we were going to go do work in there and use our PPE from a maintenance standpoint, we would enter from an outside door. And use PPE whenever in those areas, and our staff has been made aware of that. Now, we did have Mr. Smith and Mr. Stockton go in, and they did a thorough examination of the building, and I've got a report from both of those individuals if anyone needs a copy of that. But I'm going to probably let Doug talk to you a little bit because what he did a very in-depth study of the building, but in layman's terms, what the building official said, there's no structural damage there that would cause him to condemn the building. There are issues there that we need to address, and he handles this the same way he handles any other building. That as long as we have a short, mid-range, and long-term plan to address those, he will continue to work with us to keep the building open. And the fire marshal has made the same statement. He understands there are issues with the fire pump. We already have been working with the fire marshal's office. They do preliminary inspections before events occur. He has a fire marshal that's required to be at the building when the building is occupied. So we're already doing some of those things. Their position is that we can continue to do that as long as we have a plan to move forward. And they understand what the time frame, and that plan is not 20 years down the road that we're going to do something. They want to know what our short-term plans, our mid-term plans, and what our long-range plans are.
Pardon me, sir. Before moving any further, at one point prior to the renovations that were made there at the school, if my memory served me correctly, there was some concern, what if, over a period of time, some things would happen as a result of the additions that were made to the original Wilson High School. Look back at some of those maps too to give you some information.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
We'll do that. Doug, did you want to add anything to that?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor. I think Dennis has pretty much covered the major items that we looked at. The fact that there's water under the building notwithstanding, the foundation is in incredibly good condition.
Yes, it is.
And none of the traditional things that you would see in a building that's been structurally compromised are evident. I mean, things like a sagging floor, cracks in the walls, any of that. So there's no reason for us to think that it needs to be condemned due to a structural failure at this point. There are some minor, I say minor, spots where the termite damage has affected some of the structural members, wood structural members. And once those are addressed, for the most part, the main portion of the structure is going to be fine.
Thank you. Now, we've come up with several solutions to the water problem, or potential solutions, and we're going to talk about sheet piles, and we talked about that a little bit the other night. Fill the area with some type of liquid fill, and then we've actually come up with another one that we didn't discuss the other night. That's to demo the first floor section of the building, which is not being used now anyway. And I'm going to talk to you. Well, if I can, I've got a part of the presentation I'm going to talk to you about. I've got some other slides I think that will show that pretty clearly. But again, I want to talk about the risk associated with 1 and 2, because there's a lot of unknowns there. If we choose to go with 1 or 2, there's a lot of areas that we're going to find once we start the work that could elevate that price, and we want to be clear that we're saying that now. The sheet piles, we determined that we needed 5,000 linear feet to go 35 feet deep, and that 35 feet deep gets us to the clay level, and we know that from the soil borings. The estimated cost to do the sheet pile work around the whole perimeter is $6.4 million. We have some concerns where the utilities would penetrate, and we'd have to do some design work. Okay. Fill with sand and or some other material. This is actually probably our least favorite option, because it brings about some serious problems that we're not sure about what's going to happen if we put that much weight back on the facility. Remember, they excavated soil because of the instability of the soil below to put the building in originally. That's the reason why they did that. So if we go back and put that sand back in to get the elevation up above the water table, we're going to introduce a lot of weight back on the foundation of the building. And our structural engineer and our geo people are telling us that it's very likely that you're going to have a lot of settling that occurs when you do that.
And that's putting sand in there. That's similar to what you would do at home.
Well, kind of. The problem would be, Mayor, that you'd have to introduce water into the sand to make it flowable. And as you introduce the water and sand mixture so that it would flow and level out, you're going to also have to be pumping out the water. And you've got to balance that nearly perfect, or you're going to cause some real problems with the structure of the building.
But
Now-
to answer your question is yes. I mean, it's
Same
similar.
concept.
Same.
On a much larger scale, yes, sir. Now, this is something that the group has come up with recently. And what we're talking about is to do demo from this section around the perimeter of the stage and the dressing room area. Take all of that away. That's 18,000 square feet. And we estimate that cost to be around $500,000 to demo that. Now that would include recovering the walls, because that will be exterior walls that we're gonna, what used to be an interior wall will now become an exterior wall. We'd have to clean that up and dress it up, and that $500,000 would include that. Then we would suggest, as this option, to build 10,000 square feet onto the back of the building. Now, this depicts Willett Hall as it is now, and we've seen that enough. So this shows the gray area of the 18,000 square feet that we would recommend under this scenario to demo. Once we demoed that, then we would go in and just put sand and fill material in to build the elevation back up so it's well above the water table. And then the last piece of that would be to build a 10,000 square foot addition to the building, where we would be able to put dressing rooms, practice areas, things like that. And that would be a lot of discussion from here on out, what would go in that 10,000 square feet. But that 10,000 square feet would then take the place of all of the other areas, and we would build it on top of that. There's one concern: it would have to be built on piles, and it would have to be used screw piles, because if you drive piles next to a building that old, we're afraid we would create all kinds of problems. But the estimate for this project, to do it the way that we've proposed here under this scenario, $500,000 for the demolition, $2.5 million to build the 2,000 square feet, and then $400,000 to relocate utilities. Now, even if we do that, and I told you 2 weeks ago, even if we do that, we still have these damages that have been caused over the years that we would have to address. And they're the same as they were last week or 2 weeks ago, with the exception of one item, and that would be the addition of the elevator to the balcony. We added that in because we think that's important because of the ADA issue. And This again is items that you've already seen, the things that need to be done. That would be an additional 1.4 million on top of
The 3.4.
the 3.4.
Okay.
Okay? With that, we would certainly be introduced.
Yes, sir.
So this answers the question that you had, which was, are there any life safety issues that we need to address? Can we continue to hold performances there? Yes. The answer is no. There are issues, but there's nothing there that causes us to condemn the facility. Yes, sir.
What was one of the options, or did you look at what would be the cost to replace that building?
Well, we have, and let me, the second question was how to solve the water issue. Where's the water coming from? And it's just groundwater. There's nothing unique about this particular site that you wouldn't find anywhere else, most likely in Portsmouth. That you dig down 4 feet, you hit groundwater. It's unique here because we got two different types of foundations that are in play, and we have holes in the ground under the one-story area that creates an underground swimming pool, so to speak. So we understand that, and we know what the solution is. The one question, though, the last remaining question, does it make sense to invest nearly $5 million into this facility? At what point does it make more sense to build a new facility?
If it costs us 20 million to replace it, then it makes sense. But if it costs us 10 million, then it doesn't make sense.
A
'Cause
very back of the envelope,
That's right.
very back of the envelope. Caution that, underline it, put it in bold. Replacement may cost, again, I guess, 10 to 12 million dollars. And that's a number that was done very roughly as we prepared today for this
looking at almost
presentation.
putting in 50% of that cost into a structure that's built in 1955. Yeah, that's.
But that number could be high, it could be low. It's very much an educated guess.
Mr. Moody.
What seating
Thank you.
capacity would that
Hold on,
be?
Mr. Dr. Edmonds.
It's taking the perimeter of this building, determining the square foot, putting a square foot cost, and that's how rough the number is. I mean, it would be really just a wild guess to say that it was 1,200 or 1,400 or 1,500. It's not that scientific. It's just order of magnitude. If we know that the estimate here is at $5 million fixed, how does that compare to what a quick and dirty estimate on replacement? In order for this to be really a meaningful study, we need to look at the cost benefit. We have to sharpen the number of what it would cost to replace this and then compare what we know against that cost. And then you determine, and there may be, do you walk away at 50%? Do you walk away at 60 or 70 or 80? Is there some intangible value to having that facility? Does history come into play? Does location come into play? Does it come into play that you want to keep it at that venue? And again, the purpose of these briefings is not to try to condemn or to bring this facility down. We have an obligation to tell you that there are these issues. And we did that last week, and we answered your question.
Thank you, Mayor. About 2.5 years ago in the town center proposal, Willett Hall was going to be demoed to make room for Bon Secours expansion. So where do we stand with that? Is that a
pipe dream?
Yeah, okay, so that but Willett Hall was scheduled to be demoed at that point in time. The other question I have, what could we do, if anything, to Intellos to make it a dual facility?
I think we're talking about two different things. We're talking about an outdoor venue versus an indoor venue. You're talking about a stage that has the capacity of scenery dropping in. It's two different things.
I agree with the mayor and some others that before we pour that kind of money in to a building built in 1955, and obviously that's not going to correct the water table or any of that. That we look at replacing it.
I agree. I mean, I think you have to have the benefit of that, addressing the last question, which is what is the cost benefit of investing in this facility?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need that before we move on. What was there a replacement plan back when you guys did other?
Yeah, once again, the pipe dream was that a replacement facility was going to be part of the town center concept. That wasn't really defined on what type of facility that was going to be.
Dr. Davis?
I've always thought that Willard Hall serves as a great venue from a cultural arts perspective to bring the type of plays and Broadway type musicals even to some small scale to that area. It's a good area because it's out of the way of heavy traffic, plenty of parking area. I've always thought that venue would serve well. And I think it's something that somewhere along the line that the city needs to keep in mind. And Telos is a different venue.
Yes, sir.
But this is the type of venue where you could have drop down, as you said, scenery and things of that nature. And we could market it well. I think it could be a good marketing item to bring venues here. I think it's something we ought to keep looking at and have it on the table to see what we can do. That's my opinion.
What kind of agreement do we have with the, I guess, the current tenant, Community Concerts?
Well, they're just one, and we're doing that research right now. In fact, we've asked, our knee-jerk reaction, we don't think there is an agreement. But I could be wrong in giving you that answer. So we're checking that out.
Okay, look, Ms. Randall.
Okay, one of the things, because we did have an extended study some time back, and Bill, you remember because you were addressing some of the issues back at that time, and there were some concerns about then the atmosphere that would be created within the building because of the soil that it was on that particular site. So I think that we really need to look at it. Would it be beneficial in the long run to invest? What we may wind up having to do is to remove a part of the structure as they did when they added on. I guess I'm just young enough to remember when that was done, and there were some concerns expressed at that time. So I think we really need to look at it, and some of the concerns at that time was as a health hazard, if my memory serves me correctly.
These are, yes, sir.
Well, what I was going to say, too, we also have to keep in mind the return on investment.
There you go.
And you've got the Sandler Center, you got the Ferguson Center, you got Chrysler Hall. We're surrounded by a lot of venues of similar nature. Now, with that said, I always like to have something in Portsmouth, but is it going to be able to generate the revenue to offset the costs?
These are all good points. I mean,
Mayor,
All right, yes, sir.
I guess it's just thinking out of the box. If we're going to be progressive with our city, I think things of that nature ought to be on the table and not based on really what other cities are doing. What would be good for Portsmouth, and I think that'd be a great venue.
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate
the
the
last
update.
the last two items that we have before we get to budget, we'll really go quick. Brandon's going to give you you asked for a report on Afton Green, and he's going to give you a very quick report on this, and then LaVorse is going to give you an update on Pretty Up Portsmouth.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of council. At your last council meeting on March 26, you asked about the status and staying on top of the Afton Green project at Craddock. And following that, just a few days after, we sent you by mail a copy of the monthly progress report, which Brian Donahue, who is the Director of Development from PRHA, puts together following our monthly meetings. So that's a detailed listing of each of the items on a monthly basis What you have before you tonight is just a little bit of an update, and that some of those things have been updated since the March meeting. Very briefly, to give you a recap, the development agreement between the Afton Green developer and PRHA was executed in February of last year, 2012, and then beginning in June, we started having these monthly progress meetings. And the progress meetings included the developer and his design team, PRHA, the city attorney, city engineering, Parks and Rec, properties management, and Portsmouth Public Schools. And on those progress reports, there's a checklist of things that we update the progress on each month. And I have those listed here in the checkpoints. Most of the title objection issues and encroachment issues and environmental issues have mostly been resolved at this point. The rezoning application, is done. That was resolved at the last council meeting. There still is a need for the developer to present evidence of financial capacity and a presentation of the detailed house plans to the Department of Planning and to the building official. Those things are still pending. There still needs to be the notice of the 90-day notice for demolition, and based on our March meeting, we understand that will come coincidentally with closing. We have renewed and continuing to work with the Portsmouth Schools operations director, Ms. Nita Mencia-Joseph, on scheduling construction for the recreation improvements that will go on the Craddock Middle School campus. We have also just last week, the city attorney and Margaret Thorne and myself met with the principal at Craddock Middle School and also Ms. Nita Mencia-Joseph to talk about the shared use agreement for those facilities once those are all located on the Craddock Middle School campus, the shared use between Parks and Rec and the schools. And we have another meeting on Monday to hopefully get that moving along and get those agreements wrapped up. And then on the back page, you can see the items that are still pending for the closing, and that closing would involve the transfer of the property from the city to PRHA and PRHA to the developer. And just based on where we are now, we're probably looking at a June closing date, and that's as recent as Brian's and my conversation yesterday. So that's a quick status report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right.
Thank you, Brian. LaBoris?
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. I come to bring you some good news. And we are about celebrating Pretty Up Portsmouth. It's a citywide cleanup initiative that Mr. Rowe asked for some time ago. And what we figured that we would do is to put this initiative with some other things that are already branded in the city. The Portsmouth Rotary Club does the Paint Your Heart Out, and we've always engaged in the recycling for the Great American Cleanup. So we attached our event to those particular events that had already been branded, and we put out a call to everybody to get involved. Well, I'm happy to present to you that we have well over 300 and some volunteers that are going to participate. It includes Girl Scouts, it includes churches, it includes civic leagues, businesses, city employees. We have some major sponsors that solicited us to be a part of this event. Chick-fil-A, the Sam's Club in the Chesapeake area, Churchland Chiropractic, some of our community partners, TCC, RDS Recycling, Stealth Shredding, SIPSA. It is going to be a wonderful event that happens on April 20th. The recycling event that we are going to have downtown starts at 9 a.m. and goes all the way to 1 p.m. And some of the areas that we've targeted for cleanup would be the front of City Hall, doing some landscaping and changing areas out there. Some of the major portals throughout the city, at Victory and at Des Moines. The recycling area, which is right behind the old courts building, would include all of our recycling and kind of sort of kick off the citywide recycling program with this particular thing that's happening on April 20th. And we have done everything that we can do to try to promote this, to encourage people to get involved. We've used all of our methodologies, PCTV, print, email blast, 264 digital board, everything that we can use to promote it. We've used those things, and those things that we've used to promote it are part of our inventory that we already have. So not a lot of funds were expended, but we used the things we already had, vehicles that we were going to tell the story. If you remember at the State of the City, we did the palm cards, which had two initiatives. The Paint Your Pretty at Portsmouth, and also the Mayor's Get Healthy Portsmouth initiative. And I want to provide you a little gift to show your participation. Mr. Moody, this shirt is exactly for you. This is our Pretty Up Portsmouth t-shirt, and we have them for everyone. We hope that you're going to be involved. So I'm going to, while we're doing this, so I don't take up much time, I'm going to pass it out. Donna Corbis is working with us to help with this initiative. I can tell you that well over 7 different city departments are working collaboratively to make this happen, and it's been a wonderful event, and this is going to kick off our cleanup in Portsmouth. And of course, as a brand steward for the city, it always excites me to see anything that happens that helps to enhance our image, because building the brand and maintaining the brand is important, because we all have a passion for Portsmouth. We all want to ensure that everybody gets involved and that we do some things that's going to move the city forward and enable it to continue to be a viable city in the Hampton Roads area. So just want to give you a heads up about what's going on.
How are we working in conjunction with the Paint Your Heart Out? Normally they identify about 9 or 10 homes that they to go and do their thing. Are we going to be doing anything with them, or just all doing it on that day so it makes a larger footprint?
Yes, we served as a sponsor for the Portsmouth Rotary's Club for the Paint Your Heart Out. Every year we've always had a house. The city team has come together and done a house. We're doing the same thing this year. And the team this year is going to be headed up by Sharice Orden, who is with our fire department. So a lot of fire employees and some of the volunteers that we have, the over 300 volunteers, we assigned some of those to them. So they're going to be heading up that initiative. Donna and her team are going to be working with the Great American Cleanup, which is all this is happening simultaneously. And then, of course, about 7 different locations for Pretty at Portsmouth are going to be happening as well throughout the city.
How soon will we identify all those spots?
We've already identified those areas. Actually, Margaret Thorne and I went out today and we looked at 7 areas that we identified, and that's what we're going to focus on.
Yes, sir.
Have we, LaVoris, have we coordinated anything with the civic leagues?
Yes, sir.
So this effort is out in the communities as well?
Yes, sir. We have, of course, as you know, we have a civic league list. We've sent out email blasts to all of our civic leagues, and we created specifically for this event a church or a faith-based community list that we've sent out information to. As a result of that, we've got about 6 of our civic leagues that are participating, probably about 3 of our churches that are participating, several businesses, and so it really is going to be a citywide, initiative.
3 churches out of how many?
250. You're right.
200 and some.
Probably, yeah. But we like I said, we sent the call out to them. Those that responded that wanted to be on our email list, we sent the information out to them, and that's what we got. Now, granted, that doesn't mean that they're not doing anything they haven't told us about, because the goal is to get those people in the outlying areas to do what they normally do during the springtime, to do it this particular day as part of the initiative. So they may be doing something that they have not told us about.
Well, that's why I mentioned at the State of the City about the operation in its image, because Portsmouth Baptist Association had about 30-something churches, and that last fall that kicked in and done something very similar to this at City Park, and where they all met, and it must have been over 300 people there that went out and did that. So I didn't want to make sure that we didn't minimize what they did or not mention that in conjunction with what we're doing, because there are a lot of churches doing that. I know Grove has a house every year that they do doing the actually Paint Your Heart Out. Are they?
Yeah, Calvin Vandermolen, we worked with him, and they've identified 8 different houses throughout the city of Portsmouth that they're going to work on this year. And I haven't heard exactly who's the sponsors for those houses, but like you said, Grove Church normally does a house, and I assume that they are doing. Mr. Lynch said they are doing one this year as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Raymond?
Mr. Pace, one of the things that I think is so good, the churches have all wrapped around it. And a lot of times we don't see the young people, but we've been elated to see the young people, and I know our clerk works very faithfully in ensuring that our young people are being trained of some of the things that they will need to do in the future to help our senior citizens. And I did want to make mention of that because she's been doing it for years
Right.
with Parks and Recreation.
And we do have a lot of children that are participating, Cub Scouts, Girl Scouts, a lot of different Westmoreland children and youth, a lot of youth organizations that are going to come out and volunteer for that day as well.
Okay. Good deal.
Okay.
Can we get our shirt now, or?
We'll take your While he passes out the t-shirt, we're going to do some arranging up here. We're at that point where we're going to talk about budget. And as we discussed last night, we do not have a presentation for you. We've gone from the grass tops to the grassroots, and we're here to answer your questions about the budget. We started working on our homework assignments that you gave us last evening from the council briefing. We're well underway. You asked about, for example, moving the lab for behavioral health care to the new site. And we started working on that first thing this morning. In fact, the communication went out last night by text. Thank goodness for texting. So that's underway, and we're working to get that number. So if you decide to do it, we can get you a good price, and it doesn't throw into the trash can all the work that's being done now. The concept is that
How many people are we talking in that Port Center building?
In the Port Center building, we have
Bill,
about,
stand up.
About 30 staff, and we serve between 30 and 60 disabled adults each day, so they come into the program.
That was the only piece that wouldn't be included in the building that we're talking about bringing it all in, so that's not really a whole lot. Right.
Yeah.
They serve each day?
Between 30 and 60.
And so what you're facing there is not additional operating expense. You're just transferring the operating expense from location A to location B. And let's say that you're looking at a building at the elevation, the height of social services, because our clients here need handicap accessible. A one-story appendage makes sense to that building. So visualize what's being designed plus an appendage. And so we'll have that information as soon as we can get it back for you, so you can factor that into your process.
Okay.
You asked for some additional information like the TIP, that's the Transportation Improvements Program. We will have this for you, we'll send it to you tomorrow in a way that makes sense. We have quite a bit of information already that you asked for last night.
That's the list of the projects at the TPO that we had, and the Churchland Bridge was on that, okay.
The recreation study, et cetera. You asked the question too, when we got a discussion about the filters, about return on investment. Typically, when you look from a business perspective about return on investment, it's when you're doing something new, when you're adding how long. If I make this expense to expand my business, how quickly can I get a return? This is replacing something that's old. We're going to approach it from the basis of how much efficiencies we get from this, and we're having our mechanical engineers, our consulting engineers to get that number for you, so that you can see that from going from 16 with all sorts of different pumps that have different efficiencies down to 10, we are going to pick up some efficiencies. You already get a nice return on your investment with your utility system. And you see that in your general fund.
I think one of the biggest concerns there wasn't totally the return, is just, if you've got a product like, as you call it, we've got us a brewery here, at what point?
I said Coke.
Okay, Coke, okay, well, I like breweries. But at what point do you interject those amounts, and at what point does the cost to be able to get the return on that equal out or either becomes unfavorable when you've got to increase your water rates and all of those things? Or do you run it out on a long enough period, 20 years, and say, how much in 20 years will we get with this investment, keeping the thing the same? Because you don't want to be creating a product that's too expensive to purchase.
Well,
That was one of the gist of what I was getting at.
But at the same time, you don't want to be in a situation where you can't produce the product and you're already benefiting on the general fund side close to $10 million worth of return on your investment. I mean, do the math. You're talking about a significant amount of revenue that comes into the general fund from the utility system. So, I mean, I understand the question,
Okay.
but so we're working to get everything that you asked for last night. So, enough said. Let's hear your concerns and comments and questions and so forth.
On presentation night, page 2 here, you've started out with a snapshot of the things that we knew up to this point and the things we didn't know.
Right.
And we had question marks there. Can we, the general wage increase, how much is that going to cost us to do the 3%? Do we have those figures?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Carol?
Yeah, it's for the 3% and the step increase for police and fire, it's,
I want to break both of those out. I want the step increase and then I want the other one. And you can get that later. We don't have to, in
think
case
I
you can't get that now. And as well, I'd like the same thing for the vacant positions. How much are we going to expend with filling those? And we did get the piece on the schools. We got that email. That was,
Those 3 points, go ahead.
I have on the 3% for the general employees is just over $1 million, and the step increase for police and fire is $673,000.
673,000,
Yes.
So it's 1.7 rounded.
about 1.7 total. Okay. Did we run the numbers? I know we had asked you to look at between a 3 to 5%. Did we run it out to 5% to see what it would cost us?
We can't afford 5% and keeping with the imperative at keeping the tax rate neutral.
Understand, we didn't run the number?
We did run the numbers, and
How much was a 5%?
Well, every 1% for both of those two groups combined is equal to about a penny on the tax rate.
Yeah, and Mayor, what I mentioned to the manager was, if we could only do 3% this year, we looked at next year where we are for another 2 to 3. If we can't get it all this year, we'll get the rest of it next
I
year.
understand. I just wanted to know the breakout number, because again, when we get ready to make the decision and what we want to do and not want to do, we need to have all of those broken up and not lumped in together, so we will know if we need to decide there. Okay, yes, sir.
On the step increase, is the average per year going, now that we're getting back on the steps, this is getting us back there. What's going to be the average, going forward? You have any idea?
I think the average was 2%, but HR may want to
2%?
address that.
Tony, Rose,
Yes, Vice Mayor, it is 2%.
and for our team, if you know the answer, stand up, please, and shout it out.
Back on my same sheet too here, give me a brief synopsis again of the jail per diem increase. I know we incurred some.
Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon, you can do that.
Sure, it's $4. It's a $4 increase. So based on our 250, it works out to so 365,000 additional for next fiscal year.
And
Is that just operating costs increase? Because I know over at the jail, we've got that ICE inmate fund that we've used as a sugar daddy to kind of float increasing all of our costs there. And I understand that whole piece is starting to fade out, which means we need to know, like I'm asking here, the real cost of running that regional jail without all of that, so we'll know, us and the other cities, where you'll be going.
And allow us to clarify this. The regional jail would keep federal prisoners, and they were immigration prisoners, and the feds paid a good rate. And so the jail was making money off of those prisoners. And they put it away in a rainy day fund, and they used that to fund the gap between their operating expenses and the revenue that they charge back to the participating jurisdictions. Remember, the participating jurisdictions are Portsmouth, Norfolk, Newport News, and Hampton. And as long as there were ICE prisoners, that fund was healthy, and they didn't have to come back to the local governments. Well, the ICE prisoners are going away, and that revenue stream is drying up. The other factor is that the regional jail gets the most expensive inmates. If you think about it, if you were the sheriff and you had an inmate that's healthy, I'm not going to point to anybody. You had an inmate that's healthy and one that's not healthy, it's going to cost you more to maintain the unhealthy one. What do you do with them? You send them off to the regional jail. And so the per diem cost is higher. And so, Brandon.
That's it.
Okay.
Medical
I like the way he does that.
medical costs, personnel costs, to answer your question, no, the loss of ICE inmate revenue is not factored into per diems for FY14. We realize that's something big we got to address in FY15.
Down the road.
And when is that jail study coming
Good
back?
question.
We have gotten it back, and we're looking at it from a city staff perspective at this point, and we'll report back to you.
It's not going to help this budget, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Since you're talking about judicial, can we go to the,
Yes, sir.
budget?
Yeah. What page are you on?
On the judicial, 7-3, since we're talking about that.
Say again, page, which one?
7-3 judicial.
Yeah.
I just wanted to run down on the increases there. You got looked like about an $80,000 increase for the Commonwealth Attorney. Like you got another, what's that? $300,000 in the sheriff. There may be good reasons for these. Just want to know why. The increases are all the way down, starting from the Commonwealth Attorney line on down. Can you?
We can address that. The current
You
budget.
said $80,000. Where are you getting 80? I'm lost.
Maybe I'm just a quick. We went from, well, it's more than that actually. We went from 25 to 2.5 million to 2.9. Okay.
Here.
2.9, almost 3 million, 50,000. Then you go down to the juvenile and domestic. You got a increase there. Then you go down to sheriff, magistrate. You got to increase there. Just wondering what caused these increases.
Okay. Harold's going to answer that question, and we're going to put it in the context of all the constitutional officers because.
Well, actually, Mayor, that's more than 80.
It is.
That's from 2.5 to 2.9.
That's why that's about 80.
I looked past that one. I missed that one.
All right.
So that one definitely need to be explained.
That was one of my questions as well, and I was hoping the answer is going to be this increase that we're talking about, and anything outside of that, we want to get a breakdown on what those were.
Well, part of the problem
The other
lies
two
with the
are quite
current
a bit
budget
down.
that you're in.
The next two are down a
The
lot.
next two, but below that, if you go down the next one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Part of
Go
the
down to the
problem.
third one.
Part of the problem lies within the existing budget that you're in because it's underfunded. We found as we got into the fiscal year that funds that needed to be in the budget were not appropriated. And Carol, you want to?
Yes. In terms of the constitutional officer,
Make sure I understand it. Make sure I understand.
All right.
What you just said. You said
Things like fringe benefits that, we're required to pay.
so. We didn't budget for what we paid them.
Yes, sir.
So now you're trying to play catch up.
Well, you got to pay.
I'm saying for the next budget.
Yeah.
So how do we?
I think that's the problem you got when you did a 2-year budget. I mean, it's it's complicated at best to do a one-year budget. It gets even more complicated to do a two-year budget.
Yeah, I still guess that was a gross underestimate or something, because we had a bunch of vacant positions and we still went over on fringe benefits.
Well, vacancies don't work that way with constitutional officers. though.
Yeah.
Okay. And Carol's going to explain. Go ahead.
Yeah, in general, the one item that impacted all the constitutional offices is related to vacancy savings. The city, throughout the budget, assumes a 5% vacancy savings, and those offices, because they're state-funded, don't tend to generate vacancy savings.
Yeah.
If they have vacant positions, they can ask the state compensation board to have money reallocated for part-time help or other needs. And so they don't tend to generate those savings, and as a result, we're putting them in a position where they're going to go over budget because we're assuming something that isn't going to occur. So we've taken that vacancy savings assumption out for those offices and departments where it's very unlikely that they will generate anything that is close to 5%.
So hence there's the difference.
That's one of the differences.
And remember, I indicate that in my budget message. You know, that's kind of the executive summary. But we felt it was important enough to point out that it rose to the level to include it in the budget message.
And this one went from 2.5 to 2.9.
I don't know what you're looking at.
I'm looking at the Commonwealth attorneys.
Oh, okay.
$400,000. They got that many people in there. I'm not picking on you, I'm just numbers. We got. I'm looking. That's a big difference. So most of it you're trying to tell me is in there.
There were some additional items that the Commonwealth Attorney's Office requested. We weren't able to fund all of the requests, but, and Earl Mobley is here and may want to speak to this, but he requested additional city supplements for his positions because he's been finding it difficult to attract and retain qualified attorneys. He also had some requests for additional office expenses that are that he said are necessary to perform the functions of his office, and some additional part-time money. In general, there was one request that we were not able to fund at all, but in general, we funded about 50% of what he had requested.
Does that hold true for the $300,000 extra in the sheriff's line?
The sheriff requested an increase for 18 deputy court security positions.
So that's part of the increase from last year?
Yes, and that's in this year's budget. Part-time monitor for video visitation, and then some contractual increases that are in the operating side of his budget. Any other changes in the sheriff's budget relate to, because his budget did not include a vacancy savings. That was eliminated with the fiscal year 13 budget. But in general, we went through all of the department budgets, looked at the compensation line items, and made corrections so that they were properly budgeted for.
Can we get a breakdown or a cheat sheet or something on each one of those and the justifications for that, what you just said?
Sure.
And write it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And delineate the
Are you done there?
Yeah, I'm done with that, man.
Back on my page here, to fill vacant positions, do we ever get a number of what that's gonna cost? Page 2 on the, here. We're filling vacant positions here, and you had a question mark. What is that gonna cost us?
The positions are budgeted, so all of the positions that are authorized are budgeted at least the minimum salary. But the question mark is that 5% vacancy savings that we have built into all of the budget, most of the budgets except for the ones that we took it out for. And if we are filling positions more quickly than we have in the past so that departments can accomplish their mission, is it realistic to assume that we're going to be able to generate that kind of savings? And that's something we'll have to evaluate now that we're getting more experience with getting departments to be able to fill the positions more quickly.
And remember, we had this conversation early on, back in December, when you asked me for a diagnosis, and I told you that I am finding, I used several different metaphors. I said, if this is a Volkswagen, and our mission, not our desire, but our mission is to pick that thing off the ground. And Mr. Mayor, you had the front bumper and I had the rear. We're not going to lift it up. But if we put enough hands around it, and it's got to be the right set of hands, it can't be my 8-year-old grandson who would want to help. It's got to be people who are qualified. We can lift it off the ground. We've used that type of metaphor. I told you about the fact that we were down 8 mechanics. Walked into the garage one morning, saw 4 compactors in the garage. And we're not doing our citizens any, if we either have to change the mission or staff, get the right staff to do the mission. And so the punchline is that this is not new money. It really affects the bottom line for this year. We're not going to overspend the budget. It will impact on what we end up with, the difference between revenues and expenditures, how much we add to the fund balance at the end of the year.
I understand. That's precisely why I'm asking, because this has been one of the techniques that we've used over the last few years to make sure we manage our expense side based on what may be coming on the short end on the revenue side. So we have used this as a mechanism for getting us in the position where we are now. We've also used temporary employees that we didn't have to pay the fully burdened rate and all of that we're now talking about going to do. The gist of my question here is we're going to start filling all these, and we're getting ready to temps and bringing them on permanent. I'm concerned that we're getting ready to go back to where we were about 4 or 5 years ago when we had about an $8 million deficit. Because of that deficit, because of those things, I understand there's a decision and a fine line, but you can't overshoot talking about providing services, and the Volkswagen and the Cadillac is great, but 4 years ago we had an $8 million deficit.
4 years ago.
And we went through the last 4 years with using these type of techniques to make sure that we didn't reoccur in that area again. And we've had 4 straight years of general fund surplus because of things like this, not filling these positions. We understand that came at a price. We understand people probably going to complain from the service side, but again, and be able to manage ourselves through these tough economic times, those are the things we have to do. I'm just not opposed to it. I just want to make sure we had this conversation, because I don't think I want to go and turn the faucet back on and bring all this stuff in. And next year we're looking at, well, we probably shouldn't have done all those things.
Well, I think I agree with you 100%. But
oh, that's a good answer for a manager to mayor. I love it. I love it. Say that again. You agree 100%?
I've done this 40 different times.
Okay.
Okay. The interesting thing is what we have done with this budget. We're reducing our reliance on our savings account balance reoccurring expense. We've reduced that by $1 million. So I think that there's an abundance of caution in this. We're trying to get to a point where we have equilibrium, where the revenues come in, meet our expenditures. And that's the real test at the end of the day. We project that we're going to end up with a good fund balance. We're not putting the fund balance in jeopardy. I hate to jinx this budget, but it's almost a miracle, and it's not a one-time miracle that we were able to do these things, do the bold initiatives that we're talking about, and give you a budget that has no tax increase, either personal property or real estate. 4 years ago, this whole country was in a great recession, and it was reflected in the value of our properties. Our value of our properties was going down. I saw it in my individual assessments. But the good news that Janie gave you is that it looks like we've stabilized that. maybe the new good news is that there's no decrease in our value. And I thought your report was good news.
I thought it was good news.
Yeah.
Again, my point is, and all companies are doing this, and cities need to do it too. Just because we may be turning the corner doesn't mean we turn the faucet back on and we get too fat.
Too soon.
I mean, you don't want to generate too much overhead costs because we think the coast is clear. What are we doing in the areas of efficiency? Because there's a whole sector out there that still thinks that our government is too fat. We got too many people up here, and because we're seeing some of these types of things, doesn't mean we need to go in and start filling these. So that's kind of my, just the one I'm saying.
I come
that.
to work every day looking for efficiencies.
Understand.
I'm not satisfied, for example, in the way we purchase equipment. We're going to work hard to come up with a new way that makes sense. Nobody in the budget, on the budget team, is satisfied with that. But that's a problem that goes beyond our deadline to get you the budget.
Understand.
So you don't see much new equipment in this budget. The reason is that we're going to find out a new way to do it. The one that makes sense. One that makes sense, for example, we had a situation in the police department. Where'd the police chief go?
In the hall.
Where we should have sold some vehicles. They had reached their useful life, and wouldn't you know, 4 transmissions go out. And so we have to put good money into old vehicles that doesn't make sense. You know, almost the same discussion that we had about Willett Hall.
Yeah, but my issue here, again, with personnel, the most expensive thing we got is people, burden rates, and all of that. I mean, equipment can come and go, but if we start refilling these, we'll get back on it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well,
you see where I'm coming from, though, right?
Yeah, no, I support that, actually. I did notice in there that you were eliminating 4 combination inspector positions. What are the combination, but what is that description?
Gosh, we want that running.
Good evening, Graham. The combination inspectors, what they do is, it's a manner of gaining greater efficiency per person. What they do is they inspect all the different disciplines within the building. For example, instead of having an electrical inspector, a plumbing inspector, a building inspector, and a mechanical inspector, these guys do it all, do all those things. And they have the expertise and the credentials and so forth to do that. And they also do it both for residential and commercial properties.
Sounds like an important position.
Yes, sir.
Why are we eliminating 4
Because
of
we
them?
contract it now. I mean, we're picking up right on what
Okay.
the mayor said. These are contract employees, so to speak. They're no longer city employees, they're contract employees. And it's recognizing a practice that we've been doing now for some time.
Yeah, we've been using those positions to pay the contracts, but leaving the positions for you from a budget standpoint, you've been taking those dollars and doing it on a contractual basis, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so all we're doing now is what, just cleaning up the books?
We are.
Well, what are you doing with the money then? So if I got 4 spots over here and each one of them is $50,000 a year, it's $200,000, and you're spending $150 on contracting, what are you doing? How are you moving the money to still pay for the contract?
Well, this is one of the things we're going to be looking at too, is how much do we need to do in the way of inspections? So it's, who gave me this note? You? Go ahead.
I can chime in, but to clarify on the inspectors, there are currently 6 vacant combo inspector positions, and they've been vacant for a long time. That function has been outsourced, and we're paying more per FTE for the outsourced service than we would to pay for that cost in-house. Now, having said that,
How's that?
because the cost per hour is higher. So having said that, we believe that it's going to be more cost effective for us to bring that function back in-house with roughly the same, actually a little bit more average FTEs than we've been using for the outsourced function, and save some money. Now, we may find that we need to make some tweaks to the permits budget as we move through the process and gain some experience, but.
I'm confused. I read where we're eliminating 4 of the positions.
4 of the 6.
Okay, we're eliminating 4 of the 6, but we're going to turn around, since that's not a true savings, and hire additional positions?
Well, in the current budget, there is no money that is budgeted for contracted services. There are 6 positions that are budgeted, and we've been using through outside contracting the equivalent of 2 FTEs. So if the inspection job can be done with 2 FTEs, and we can do that in-house less expensively, then it makes sense to bring the number of positions down to the number we actually need on an ongoing basis, and save the money that we've been spending by outsourcing.
Okay.
Makes sense.
And
In
again,
other words, the positions were there in the budget, but they weren't physically there.
they were not filled. They have been vacant for a long time.
Unfilled, funded but unfilled positions, to the mayor's point.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, the concern, this thing rolls back over into our whole pension system, all of that stuff is out of whack. We're trying to do some things and hopefully going to do some things this year to try to get this thing as at least 80%. But the more people we start piling back up here, because we need to be everything to everybody, we're gonna hurt ourselves, and
Not on
I just
pension.
don't want to be here
Not on
in
pension.
2 years. I think I got 2 more left on this term. Be here and finding out we didn't open the floodgates a little too early.
On pension, any new hires, remember?
VRS.
VRS.
That's gone to hell in a handbasket too. It's just, we don't talk about it every day. That's a major problem.
Well,
And they tell us, they send us the bill what we pay. They just don't allow us to do the conversating what we do about our piece,
that's a
right?
conversation that you need to have with your General Assembly delegation, because a couple of years back, they rated the VRS. Okay, and our VRS costs are going up. The VRS does not suffer under the same thing that our 2 closed systems have. That's a live system. There are new employees coming in. And so it's not fair to say that a new employee is going to impact our 2 closed systems. It's 2 totally different things.
And new employees pay a percentage of
They
their
pay
own
5%.
into
Yeah,
it,
It's
correct?
roughly 50/50.
And they're going, unless they're already vested in VRS, they're going into the second tier plan, which has a lower level of benefits and is therefore less costly overall.
And they're personally investing in it.
Please understand this, that it's, the ground is always shifting on pension plans. What was true in '84? If one tried to do a side-by-side comparison of the pension system, the Portsmouth retirement system against VRS, you can't make that same comparison today. Because the ground has changed, it's shifted, and it continues to shift. There was one retirement option for VRS back 25 years ago, 30 years ago. There are multiple retirement options now for VRS. You can get all your money in a lump sum. You can get it in several lump sums. You can get it with a variety of different ways that were not there back in '84.
Mr. Moody?
A couple other things, enterprise funds. I was pleased to see in the budget that we're talking about some strategies to reduce the city's contribution to the enterprise funds. I think the largest being the golf fund, which I think, to use your verbiage, it was growing rapidly. I think proposed contribution is like 1.3 million, which is like 2 cents on the tax rate. And don't get me wrong, I think Bidaway has certainly been a catalyst for development over in that area, and I think we got probably the best pro in the region. But with that said, we got to stem that growth, and I noticed in the budget it's like a 10% increase. So I know some of the strategies have been, well, let's raise the green fees, let's something with the twilight golfing, but are these things going to really work? I mean, 10% increase each year.
One of the-
1.3 million in a cash-strapped city is a lot of bucks.
Well, it is. And we had it. I'll share with you a concern in a discussion that started one Friday afternoon, one Friday, and changed over the Monday. That particular Friday afternoon, we were going to sound the death knell for right-of-way. That my recommendation would be we fund it one more year, and if we don't find a solution, then we do some other option that takes us out of the golf business. Okay? We felt that that was too radical to surprise you, surprise the community, surprise the world. And so we felt that, when I say we, that's a collective we, but there needed to be, at first, an attempt to try to improve the revenues. No, I don't think that we can get to a situation where revenues from rounds of play are going to equal expenditures. We also, there's a lot of debt. It breaks out, that 1.3 breaks out 50% in operating and 50% on capital. There's about $8.5 million worth of outstanding debt that went in to improve, by the way, to include the pavilion out there and to improve City Park. And so as you try to look at this and say, does R really equal E? Is it really fair to put the pavilion on all the revenue that comes into the golf play? I think we need to have a larger conversation, and we need to have a civic engagement on this process. But I share your concern, Bill. I mean, when I saw $2.3 million, I said, oh my goodness, that's 2 pennies on the tax rate. And I play golf only once a decade.
Well, I do think we need to look around the area at other municipalities. There are some city-operated courses, see if they're experiencing the same thing. But I think it's always a good idea to have a plan B, and you don't have to commit to anything to look and see what a private operation would be willing to pay to operate the golf venue.
Yes, sir.
Without committing to it.
And we had last year, we had E.L. Ham and Associates to come in and do a thorough review of what we had there. We were actually pretty pleased with some of their recommendations. They did think some of the stuff you're asking for now, they did say, hey, give the golf pro a little flexibility to be able to move fees and all that around to try to generate that. But I still don't think that's anywhere near the dollars that we're talking here that's going to help us
But in the
recoup what
conversation
we
last
get.
year, and I think it was championed by the former vice mayor, we need to look at the whole operation and based on some of the recommendations that came out of Ham, because there were some things there that were brought to our attention, if you remember, Mayor, that we still haven't looked at. So when we can have that discussion offline.
The other thing, Mayor, with you'd mentioned efficiencies and savings. I always like to have that discussion as well. Something that's simple, and I know with fuel cost, that's a major expenditure for our city. And I would like to see us come up at some point in time, and I mentioned this last year, with idling policy, fuel saving policy, if you may. Because I go in, every once in a while to get a cup of coffee from a 7-Eleven or something when I'm out and about, and I see municipal vehicles running. And if you times that by the number of vehicles and number of miles we drive, something as simple as that can save a lot of money, but there are also devices that you can equip your vehicles with I know trucking fleets have incorporated those things and can result in substantial savings. I mean, cities have realized savings in the millions of dollars over fuel policies and things they've done to the vehicles to ensure that they get better mileage.
Good point.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I think I just found my answer, but I'm going to make sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Where are you?
I'm on page 14 of the briefing, and I'm on page 3-1 of the general fund.
Okay.
I think I found the answer, but you briefed us about 4.5 million cash fund to CIP and 1.2 million to balance for the GF budget.
Yes, sir.
Is that the 5.6 million I'm looking at on 3.3-1? Is that the same?
It's the planned use of fund balance,
Okay.
which includes the reduced level of money to balance the budget and the cash funding of CLP.
All right. Just want to make sure I found. All right.
Let me, let's go over here to the school system. You and I chatted earlier about the 3.3 here on the health piece. You're saying here that Mercer is saying just by them converting from fully insured, I'm in this summary, page 5.
Page 5.
Just to go from fully insured to self-insured, nothing else, no merging, no anything, we're going to save $3.3 million.
That's correct.
That's correct. Just
That's the conversion.
And as I said last night, I wish I had rearranged my comment about joining. The savings is not combining the system.
okay.
That savings is marginal. The savings is going from fully insured to self-insured. And it's my understanding from talking with the school administration, they have been thinking about that anyway. This gives them an incentive. I firmly believe if it was the other way around, I'd be recommending that we abandon self-insured. But it's not the case. It's not true. With self-insurance, first you don't pay the insurance company the profit, and their profit is double-digit. And self-insurance, you tailor exactly what you're going to pay for. You don't have to pay for some exotic operation that only occurs once every 10,000 people that might be tacked on, no matter how slim you try to make the policy. So there's a true savings in going from fully insured to self-insured. We're self-insured not only on medical, we're self-insured for our liability.
Right. I guess two questions. One, first of all, is why haven't we done this before?
That's a question I cannot answer.
Okay, because again, look, what are the risks associated with going to self-insured on their piece?
The risk is no greater than our risk. Our risk is not anything. The risk is having the courage of just doing it, if that makes sense. It needs to be just done.
$3.3 million, we ought to do it. I mean, but we didn't make sure.
And then again, as we discussed before, how does the employer pay the premium? Okay? We talked about 30 years ago, most public employers said, I will pay 100% of the cost of your health insurance. And I can tell you as a manager, you tried to protect that. And I can tell you that we looked at going up on co-pays and deductibles to try to keep that 100%. Pretty soon you start running out of rabbits to pull out of a hat. And you move from a fully paying the cost to sharing the cost between the employer and the employee. The health insurance premium for the schools, the way it's been explained to me by the school officials, is that they pay 95% of the cost of the premium for their employee. We don't do that. You don't find many public agencies that do that nowadays.
50-50 is best.
They pay how much again?
They pay
That's right.
$95. If the premium is $100, they pay $95 and the employee pays $5. Now, on the average, ours is 70-30. And so
We're 70-30?
Yes, sir.
And
so that's how you reduce the cost of your operating budget, is that you...
They make money now.
you transfer that cost to your employees. I'm sad to say, but that's a reality that's been taking place over the last 30 years.
Oh, no, private industry is last 4 or 5 years, we've gone from the
Yeah.
100% down to 50
Yeah.
in most places. Some of them are 60-40,
some lower
some
than that.
60-40 the other way. Okay, while we're still on the, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, even if you adopt the budget as it is, the decision of whether or not the school board goes self-insured or fully insured is their decision. You can't make them do it. You can give them a financial incentive to do it, and that's what this budget does. And I truly believe, otherwise would not have recommended to you, that there is savings on the order of magnitude of $3 million that they can save by going self-insured. But it's their decision.
Got it. Okay, 2 other issues here. You show $100,000 savings with merging of the maintenance. You want me? Oh. Thought you were cutting me off.
Never cut you off, Mayor.
Okay. The maintenance, the garage piece.
Yes, sir.
We talked about $100,000 savings there. Did we ever look into that issue that I raised the other night during the budget presentation? That 6 months ago we had Richard Hartman look into that. He came back with a formatting issue. We weren't configured right over there to do it. All of these things that told us leave it alone, and now we're going to save 100.
Let me
Are you the guy Richard
He's
talked
the
to?
guy. No. Let me tell you my philosophy. My philosophy to our team is work to yes. Don't work to no, work to yes. Find a way to skin the cat. And so when this came up, I told Dennis, work to yes. Don't give me a reason no. And that's true in everything that we're doing. We're working to yes. No's an easy way to go. Yes is a difficult way. And I'm
About 6 months ago, we were trying to get the Burton's Point piece so we could merge all that property. I think the school systems and us was all on the same page. Let's see if we can't do that. We looked at trying to create a 3rd shift for the buses so they could be working on them at night and had them ready for the kids in the morning and all of that. And
Everything you said is correct, Mayor.
Okay.
The difference in this proposal and the proposal 6 or 8 months ago is that the school board had allocated some funds to move that facility, some capital funds from the Burton's Point location to the location behind S.H. Clark Elementary School. When we began having some dialogue about combining these services, I met with Anita Mencia Joseph and Dr. Stuckwish, and there's been an agreement made that they would take what was over $1 million, transfer that to the city and allow us to build 5 additional bays onto our garage. Then we can bring those buses in. The problem 6 months ago was that if you bring a vehicle in, you've got a trash truck and it's torn apart in a bay, you can't pull it out in the middle of the night, shift to a different mechanic who brings his tools in and do school buses. We needed more space. And
so this savings is going to cause us to create 4 new bays, add on 4 new bays.
5 additional bays.
5 additional bays for the, okay, because I thought there was an issue before with our fire trucks and all of that and being able to use them
We
there.
had this discussion, and remember, it came about, and I wasn't aware of what happened 6 months ago, whenever it happened. I was aware of the fact that the school board was going to the planning commission to get a zoning permit to put the garage behind
S.H. Clark, right.
And it made no sense with what to continue to impact that area with an industrial use when the housing authority has done such a great job
At Seaboard Square.
And that we had on that same meeting the consideration for Kroger and that great marketplace that they're doing, a $20 million investment. So it didn't make sense to bring north an industrial use. And that started the discussion with David and me and between you and your counterpart. They were, if I remember the number correctly, they were prepared to spend $1.2 million to build a garage behind Clark. Okay. Well, that garage has got to have bathroom facilities, a parts room, and a rest area, a break area, and so forth. And as we discussed, we don't need 2 of those. We don't need 4 bathrooms. We don't need 2 park rooms. We don't need 2 break rooms.
I get it. The piece that was missing was adding on to.
Yeah, $1 million makes a difference.
It makes a big difference. So I didn't know. Nowhere does it say that we're going to add on 5 bays. So to be able to accomplish this and to get these savings here, we're going to spend how much to build the 5 bays?
The school board is going to allocate the five.
That's my next question. Where's the money coming from to do that?
It's right at 600,000.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, yes, sir. It makes sense now, didn't?
While we
Okay.
while we
I
on this,
thought that was understood because we had prior conversations about this.
Yeah, no. Okay, very good. All right, Mr. Moody?
while we on the subject of schools, I know we're folding the purchase of school buses into the city's procurement, and I think at what, $1 million.
It's going to be a savings.
Now, does that represent a savings? Are we taking money that would have originally been given to the school system? Or are we just moving it over to our side of the ledger?
It's that. It's really just moving it
So
into
it's just
our.
an accounting?
Well, it's more than that.
I mean, why, I guess my question is, why are we doing it? Does it represent a savings?
As we discussed last night, there ought to be one CIP for the city. And that it should have a city component and a school component. Because you issued the debt.
That's right.
The school boards in Virginia don't have taxing authority. They don't have the authority to issue debt. And so you're the people that get elected and have the only authority to raise taxes and to issue debt. And so it only makes real good sense and real good transparency and real good accountability that there be one CIP, not 2.
So it's just a consolidation
Yes, sir.
over to our CIP?
And as we talked last night, this is hopefully ramping it in. This is the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, because it's the buildings and all those other things.
That becomes a little bit more difficult.
We've got roofing jobs and things like that that need to be done on quite a few of them. Okay, and the last one I had on the schools was the other 100,000 savings was with the consolidations of the finances department. What are we looking at there?
Well, we're looking at, to start with, and again, my recommendation to you all, and I've said this publicly, I said it a week ago, this building doesn't need 2 finance departments. We don't need 2 purchasing agents, we don't need 2 payroll managers, we don't need 2 risk managers, we don't need 2 of everything. One would do.
So why are we only saving $100,000?
Because again, we're ramping it in. And we're looking at the easy stuff, which is purchasing and payroll. Payroll becomes a little bit more difficult because they're already on our Munis system. We're not. And we need to make that migration. So our goal is to do that come January 1.
Okay.
And payroll, when you change the accounting system with a payroll, it's better to do it at a calendar year, because the calendar year is your tax year, and you got 941s to deal with and all that other stuff. So our goal is to make the switch January 1. So this is part of ramping up that efficiency that one would receive by consolidating this financial function.
I guess go ahead.
Yes, sir.
But mine was just had they been receptive to that?
My same.
Well,
Yeah.
you guys did such a good job in teeing up.
I know
this
we talked about it when we
conversation.
had the joint
when you
meeting,
met with
but-
the school board in
Yeah.
here,
Right.
and you said you want to see less duplication and more consolidation. That very week, the very next day, I called David. He was at a meeting. The very next day, he came to work and called me, and so we started working on it then.
Okay, good.
Well, I guess,
When it makes,
as the chairman and the rest of the school board members, have they bitten into this? Are they on board with it?
I can't speak for them.
Because that's another piece.
Well, they said to you that night. I mean, I was watching their body language like you all were, and I didn't want anybody to say no. I mean, that was the time to say no. I mean,
but it makes sense.
it does make sense.
Makes a whole lot of sense.
Would that efficiency be greater in the next year's budget as
Yes,
you
ma'am.
put these things together?
As you put it that way.
Okay, all right, for the sake of time, and we've got several more of these, any other questions?
Are you losing your voice?
It's rare, but, yes, sir, it sounds like it. I actually got several other questions.
It's budget talk.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is, budget talk, but.
Do you want to meet on the 16th? I mean, it's
Oh,
only-
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
What
Yep.
time do you want to meet? What time do we have it down on the calendar?
You can meet at 5 or 6 o'clock, it's up to you.
6 is good.
Okay, 6 o'clock, yeah.
Okay.
Very good time.
With dinner at 5, for those that come home.
Okay, all right, let's go ahead and adjourn, and we'll pick this up later. Thank you very much. Great job.
Just before you adjourn, are there any city council liaison reports? Okay, we'll break it for dinner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.